Welcome back to UK Bike Fit. If you've been enjoying our videos recently, don't forget to just like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And we've got a really interesting video today because I'm the one getting bike fitted. And it's going to be a bit of a unique, different bike fit because if you didn't know, I had an accident, a crash last year at the end of September, and I broke my hip, and I've since had surgery. Chris will insert some footage from the crash, I'm sure. So after the surgery, I've definitely got some physical differences that I think are going on, and it's going to impact the way I ride a bike. I've been riding a little bit on the turbo recently just to get back into the swing of things, and I'm noticing some problems. So Jen, our physio and bike fitter at UK Bike Fit, is going to help me out, and she's going to fit me on my bike today and hopefully get me right and get me sorted and get me back on the pedals. So the first part of any bike fit is getting assessed off the bike, and from the riding that I've done so far, I definitely think there's some obvious physical changes gone on. I feel like there's a leg length difference. I feel like the saddle's very uncomfortable. My saddle height probably isn't right. Like, there's a lot of things that just feel weird and wrong that were obviously perfectly fine before. So we'll find out what the off the bike, the body changes are after my surgery and after my accident, and then we'll have a look on the bike and see how that relates. So after my accident, like I said, I had surgery, and the surgery that I had meant that I couldn't weight bear, put any weight through this leg for 6 weeks. So initially I had a period of time basically in a bed. I couldn't stand up at all, get out of bed. And then I've gradually gone through the process of getting a bit stronger, putting a bit more weight through it. So basically I've had a lot of time where I've not been riding, I've not been walking properly, I've not been exercising anywhere near as much as I would, not been doing day-to-day tasks, I've not been driving. So, you know, a lot of things that are going to affect my physiology now that is ultimately going to affect me on the bike when I start riding again. So part of this process is going to see what those changes are and then relating that to the bike and to cycling later on. So we've just finished up with the off the bike assessment, and there are some big differences there that are a result of the injury and the surgery and the period of time off the bike and off of exercising. So first of all, the range of movement in my hip joint is a lot more limited than the left side, especially in rotation, which is a movement that like closes down and opens up the joint and tests the joint. My right hamstring, so it's this side that I have had surgery on, my right hamstring is now a lot more flexible than my left, which we think is down to a leg length difference, which is another thing that we've picked up, and also just the fact that this leg is very deconditioned. I've not been exercising it or even walking on it as much in the last 3 months. But yeah, the big thing is the leg length difference that's there, and it is really noticeable. And the test that Jen did for the leg length difference is, you know, relatively crude test for leg length. There's no real, or the only specific test you can do to find out what your leg length difference is to x-ray you and measure the bones. So this test picks up some major differences, but the specific ones you need an x-ray. But for it to be so visible during this test, there must be quite a significant leg length difference there, and it's very clear to see on the video that we'll show you. And the other really obvious thing when we were going through some biomechanical movement testing is that I'm very weak on this side, can't put a lot of weight through it even when trying to do a single leg plank, and then when I'm doing some squats, I really have to lean and compensate for the lack of strength and mobility in this hip. So it'll be interesting to see if any of that sort of movement pattern shows up when we have a look at me on the bike. So I have been riding a little bit in the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, just on the turbo, not on this bike, on a different bike, just to get the legs turning again, basically. And you know, some of the things I've been feeling on there have been saddle discomfort. I've had to move my saddle height because when I first got on it, it just felt completely unrideable. The positions felt longer than before, felt more of a stretch. So we'll have a look now and see how this bike looks. I have, you know, just like I don't know where the fit on this bike is anymore. I've just dropped the saddle a little bit again so it's rideable. I've got a different chain set on there, like I've got a different saddle, so it is a bit all over the place at the minute anyway. But yeah, it'll be good to see how I'm riding now compared to where I used to be. So Jen's just putting some dots on me now. So this is so that when we take some video, we can see certain anatomical points on the video, and that's what we can use to sort of take measurements from and compare before and afters and things like that. So I'm just going to go through that now, and then we'll get into the fit. So we've just taken some video footage of me riding, just have a look at my biomechanics on the bike. But now, and I think this will be really interesting, is looking at my saddle pressure, because I can definitely feel a difference between how it used to feel and how it feels now. And knowing now that we've got a leg length difference, I'm interested to see how that's affected my pressure on the saddle. So we're going to put that on now, test it and see what it's like to before. Luckily, I have got some saddle pressure analysis from when I've tested it before on this bike and on this saddle. So we'll be able to compare like for like and see what the differences are. So we've just tested saddle pressure, and I'm definitely pleasantly surprised about how it's looking. There are some differences there, left and right side, that I'd expect to see because of what's happened to my hip, but the pressure itself is actually quite even and in the areas that I'd expect it to be, and we've still got a nice central channel down the middle. So where I'm actually sitting on the saddle is still really good. The main issue that we are seeing with the saddle pressure is actually this little white squiggle in the middle, and the white squiggle tests or tracks the center of pressure, so it's testing how I'm moving on the saddle, and we can see it's a little bit more biased towards the left side, so my center of pressure is off towards the left, and the movement track through the right side is not very clear. It's very squished, and that white squiggle is just a bit of a mess rather than having a nice circular shape, which is what we'd expect to see. So essentially my right side of my pelvis and my hip is moving very differently now, but I am still sat in a good spot on the saddle, which is great. So I think some of the reasons why this is better than what we expected to see is that I've already made some changes to my position just based on feel when I've first got on the bike. I've dropped my saddle, I've dropped my saddle height, I've got different cranks on, so I have got a shorter crank set on than I'd normally ride. These are 160mm cranks, and I did that sort of preemptively because I knew my hip's not going to move that great. So having shorter cranks is going to help with that, at least in the early stages to rehab and to get back riding. So I do think that has had a positive effect on my saddle pressure. And the last thing I've done is also changed pedals. So I've changed to a time pedal, which is a wider platform compared to my speed plates that I was using. And again, I do think that's probably helped to keep the saddle pressure quite low rather than have a lot of hot spots and movement on the saddle that I don't want. So we've got the video footage from me pedaling on each side, and the first thing that we wanted to do was to look at my left and right side to see what the asymmetry looks like on the bike. We know what it looks like off the bike, so now we're going to see how that translates to on the bike and my pedal stroke. So I've just had a look at and marked up 2 joint angle measurements here. When my knee is at maximum extension, I've got the knee angle and we've got the ankle angle. And we're going to look at those 2 things and see what the differences are. So obviously we're looking at my left side here, and my knee angle is at 130 degrees. And if I flick to the right side, which is my broken side, the knee angle is at 140.7 degrees. So there's a huge 10-degree difference in my knee extension, left versus right. And my right side is extending further than my left. Now this is, knowing what we know about my leg length difference, this is more than likely down to the fact that the right leg is shorter now, so in terms of extension, it's having to stretch further or extend further to get to the bottom of the pedal stroke versus my left side. So We're going to have a look now and see what we can do about that. The first thing is to have a look at shims under the cleats to take up a little bit of that difference in my leg length, and we'll see what effect that has on my pedal stroke and my knee angles afterwards. We're going to start off by putting some of these under my cleat, and these are cleat shims. So these are great if you have got a little leg length difference, or in my case, a big leg length difference, for balancing out left and right side and creating symmetry on the bike when you've got asymmetry in your body. So Jen's going to put these in for me, set my cleat position, and then we'll retest my pedal stroke and see what effect it's had. So now we've put a stack of 3 shims in there, which is a total of 9mm under my cleat on my shorter leg now. So that should have an effect on the balance and the symmetry through my pedal stroke. So we're just going to look at that now on the camera. So we've taken a bit of footage now that I've got the shims in, and I've just overlaid these 2 bits of footage. So we've got the black and white image when the foot's at the bottom of the pedal stroke is the previous footage when I didn't have any shims in, and the colour image is now me having the 9mm of shims under my cleat. And if I scroll between the two, you can see how much more bend there is in my knee on the coloured image where I've now got shims under. My hip is being held a lot higher through the bottom of the pedal stroke, and you can see my foot physically lift away from the pedal because of those shims. So those shims have made a big difference. When we've measured the knee angle, we can now see that we're at 136.7 degrees here, whereas before we were at 140 point something. So about 4 degrees difference in my knee extension. So it's still a little bit off of where my left knee is with this saddle height, but 9mm of shims is quite a lot. So I think the next step for me is to go away and ride the bike and ride more. Like I've not been riding at all basically for the last 3 or 4 months. And I've had this short leg since the end of September, so my body will have started to adapt to that, and I need the same process to happen on the bike. I need my body to be able to start adapting to my new biomechanics, my new physiology, and getting used to the shims is all going to be part of that. So I think with a bit more riding time, maybe 4 or 6 weeks of riding, things will look very different again, and at that point I'll come back and retest and see what the differences are in the long term. But short term, it's made a difference in the right way that we want it to. So the next stage now is to go and ride the bike and probably get to the gym as well and start strengthening. So if I come back and retest in a month's time and there's still a little bit of asymmetry there that we need to fix, rather than just keep stacking shim after shim under my cleat, one of the things we could do is to ride with a slightly shorter crank on this right side, which would have a very similar effect to having shims under the cleat. The downside of having lots of shims under your cleat is that it takes your foot quite a long way away from the pedal, which introduces a bit of instability. So having one shorter crank than the other is another way to combat some sort of large asymmetry. I've got the luxury of having a crank set on there at the minute, which actually has adjustable cranks on it. So I can test between a 155mm crank and a 160mm crank just by changing the end piece where the pedal attaches into. So we're going to explore that a little bit further in another video. So keep an eye out for that. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, click subscribe and you'll see it. But we're going to see what effect that has and whether a shorter crank on one side is going to be good for me or not. We've spoken a lot about the saddle position and the pedal stroke, which is obviously the main part of my fit today because that is the main bulk of the problems that I've got and the changes that have happened. But I just want to talk about the rest of the fit, I suppose, in very basic terms. This bike used to be my race bike and used to race it in crits and road races. So it was set up to be quite an aggressive, racy position, quite a long bike. I'd spend a lot of time on the drops. So at the moment when I ride the bike, having had that time off, it feels really aggressive now, like really aggressive. Whereas before I used to get on and it felt absolutely fine. Whereas now it does feel long, it feels stretched out. And in terms of the position, my front part of my body, for a race bike and race position, this will be quite good. But for me now, and I'm not going to use this bike for racing in the near future, I need a little bit more of a relaxed position to just have it as a bike that I'm going to go out and ride and enjoy and hopefully put some miles and hours into. So to sort of repurpose or change the purpose of this bike, we'll basically just be having a shorter stem on, probably putting a spacer or two underneath the stem just to make it that bit more relaxed for me, which is a big plus point for not cutting your steerer tube, because so many people have told me I should cut my steerer tube and I've not done it, and now I can use it because I've not cut it. So I'm going to raise the stem up and have it a little bit more relaxed. So if you want to change the fit of your bike, I just wanted to make this point that we can do that. If you want to repurpose the bike that you've got from a race bike to a relaxed bike, or from a relaxed bike to a race bike, you can do that with different changes around the front end. So finished up with my fit, and there are some big differences there that I really need to go away now and sort of work on the bike and off the bike at the gym to try and address some of those imbalances now that I am able to do a little bit more and cycle a little bit more and work out a little bit more. We will revisit this in around a month's time once I've done some regular riding and got used to these changes, and hopefully made some changes off the bike as well with my gym work, and then we'll see what the long-term differences are. We've just basically worked on the pedal stroke today. Once we've got that settled and sorted and a bit more symmetrical and balanced, then we can start looking at the specifics around other stuff to do with the fit. But really now I just need to go away and work on this. So if this has been helpful, or if this is useful to you, let us know in the comments, just so I know that how many people really want to see a follow-up of this and see what the long-term changes are. But also, if you're feeling like you've got some sort of asymmetry, maybe not as severe as mine, or structural as mine, if you've got some sort of asymmetry on the bike, hopefully this has helped you to see that there are changes that can be made to make your cycling position and comfort and efficiency on the bike a lot better.